Have you ever thought you had a very lucky day? What if it wasn't actually luck, but you were minutes away from dying without realizing it? Why do we continue living with total normalcy after having dodged death so closely? Why does the body survive while the mind never receives the warning? And there's something even more unsettling. Most of these situations aren't rare or extreme. They can happen to anyone at any moment. Today, we are going to reveal those invisible instants in which you were much closer to the end than you ever imagined. Stay, because after this, you will see your own life differently. We like to believe that danger is obvious, that death arrives announcing itself with clear signals, an accident, intense pain, an alarm impossible to ignore. But the reality is much more disturbing. In many cases, the body enters critical zones without activating any conscious alert. There is no panic. There is no fear. There is no sense of urgency. We just continue with our routine, completely oblivious to what is happening. The science and survival stories show an unsettling pattern. There are everyday situations in which the margin between life and death is measured in minutes, sometimes even seconds. And the only reason we are still here isn't skill, nor intelligence, nor preparation. It's pure statistical chance. To understand to what extent this is real, we are going to start with one of the places where we believe we are safest and where, paradoxically, we have most often been on the verge of not returning home. The road. Think about the last time you were driving and suddenly you came to without clearly remembering the last few seconds of the journey. That moment when you look at the road and wonder how you got there. You weren't distracted. You weren't daydreaming. Most likely you had a micro-sleep. A micro-sleep is an episode of total unconsciousness that lasts about 4 seconds. 4 seconds in which the brain shuts down completely. You don't see, you don't react, you don't make decisions. At a speed of 70 miles per hour, those 4 seconds are equivalent to traveling more than 100 meters completely blind. It's like closing your eyes and letting go of the steering wheel while the car keeps moving forward. The statistics are clear. 1 in 5 serious traffic accidents involves a driver who fell asleep for only a few seconds. You don't need to fall deeply asleep or lose control in an obvious way. A blink that's just too long is enough for the body to go into disconnected mode. If you have ever woken up suddenly while driving with a strange feeling in your chest, it wasn't your imagination. In that interval, your life depended solely on the road being straight, on there being no other vehicle nearby, and on no one making an unexpected move at that exact moment. It wasn't skill. It wasn't a reflex. It was pure luck. The reason you are still here listening to this is that during those exact 4 seconds, nothing happened. No obstacle, no curve, no someone else's mistake. In any other minor circumstance, the outcome would have been completely different. And the most unsettling part is that most people don't remember these episodes as a near-death experience. They remember them as a simple lapse. And when you think the danger ends when you get out of the car, the reality is even more disturbing. Because the next risk isn't on the road, it's waiting for you in your own home. Now remember something different. That persistent headache you had for days. That strange feeling of tiredness when waking up every morning. That inexplicable sleepiness that disappeared just as you left the house and curiously was no longer there when you arrived at work. It wasn't stress. It wasn't a bad night. Most likely you were being slowly poisoned by carbon monoxide. Carbon monoxide is invisible, odorless, and completely silent. It doesn't cause burning, it doesn't warn, it doesn't generate an immediate sense of danger. It simply displaces the oxygen in your blood while you continue with your routine, convinced that you just feel a little unwell. It is one of the most common and, at the same time, most ignored threats within homes. For every person who officially dies from carbon monoxide poisoning, at least 50 more have a close encounter with death without knowing it. They survive only because, by chance, they leave the house in time. That cold that magically disappeared when you went on vacation was not a coincidence. It was the absence of the gas that was slowly accumulating in your home. A faulty heater, poor ventilation, an old appliance. Nothing spectacular, nothing that draws attention. While you slept, your body fought to stay conscious. And if you had stayed there a few hours longer, you probably wouldn't have woken up. The only reason you're here is because, without knowing it, you interrupted the process just in time. And the most unsettling thing is that even after surviving something like that, there is no clear memory of the danger. There is no traumatic memory, only a vague feeling of having been sick. But the risk was real, and it was happening in the place where you're supposed to be safest. And if you believe that the greatest danger always comes from the outside, what follows is even more disturbing. Because the next enemy wasn't in your house, it was inside your own body. When we think of a heart attack, we imagine a clear scene: intense chest pain, a hand clutching the heart, immediate collapse. But the reality is much more silent and, for that reason, much more dangerous. More than 20% of heart attacks occur without the person realizing they are happening. They are the so-called silent heart attacks. This is especially frequent in women and in people with diabetes. Instead of obvious pain, confusing and easy to ignore symptoms appear. A discomfort that feels like indigestion, a deep exhaustion that lasts for days, a strange pain in the jaw, a sudden cold sweat during an ordinary meeting. None of that sounds like an emergency. And precisely because of that, no one acts. Meanwhile, inside the body, something critical is happening. One of the most important arteries of the heart, known as the widowmaker, may be 95% blocked. Blood flow barely passes through. The heart muscle begins to suffer real damage. And the person goes on with their life, convinced they just had a bad day. The reason why people survive these episodes is not usually medical intervention or a quick reaction. It's pure biological chance. Sometimes small blood vessels manage to temporarily compensate for the blockage. Other times, a tiny clot dissolves at the last possible second. Minutes later, the outcome would have been irreversible. Years later, an electrocardiogram may reveal scars on the heart, permanent marks of an attack that occurred without pain, without alarm, and without conscious memory. The person then discovers that they were minutes away from dying and never knew it. And if you think that's the fastest thing that can happen, there's something even more immediate, something that can end everything in a matter of minutes without room to ask for help. Think of the last time you ate alone, a completely everyday moment, a bite that goes down the wrong pipe, and suddenly the body reacts with a violent and desperate cough. It wasn't just an uncomfortable sensation. In that instant, you entered a critical zone. A complete airway obstruction leaves very little margin. After 4 minutes without oxygen, the brain begins to suffer irreversible damage. At 6 minutes, in many cases, everything ends. When you are alone, there is no one who can help you. No one who hears, no one who intervenes in time. That intense cough is not accidental. It is not simply a bothersome reaction of the body. It is a last desperate attempt to generate enough internal pressure to expel the object and save your life. Every spasm, every gasp is a silent struggle to keep breathing. Thousands of people every year don't make it, not because they were careless, but because time was not on their side. The difference between surviving and not doing so can depend on seconds. And when it happens, there is no epic sense of danger. There is only panic, confusion, and a body trying to correct a minor error with huge consequences. Every meal you eat in solitude is, without you knowing it, a small statistical bet. Most of the time, nothing happens. But when something fails, there is no room to react calmly. Life depends on an automatic response that works perfectly. And yet, this is not the most treacherous risk, because the next one can start so mildly that you wouldn't even interpret it as a threat. Think of that time you ate something and felt weird for a while. A slight itching in the lips, a strange sensation in the throat, a discomfort that disappeared after an hour and that you didn't mention again. It was nothing serious, you thought, but in reality, your body was giving you a final warning. That was the beginning of a severe allergic reaction known as anaphylaxis. In its early stages, it can seem harmless. There is no intense pain, no immediate panic, only subtle signs that are easily confused with a passing nuisance. But the immune system has already made a dangerous decision. Allergies do not stay the same over time. With each exposure, the reaction can become stronger. The next time, the inflammation can progress faster. The throat begins to close. Breathing becomes difficult. And in the most extreme cases, death can arrive in barely 15 minutes. The most terrifying thing is that a person can develop a deadly allergy to something they have consumed all their life without any previous problem. The body suddenly decides that the substance is an absolute threat. There is no prior warning. There is no clear reason, only an extreme response that occurs without warning. That slight itch you ignored could have been the difference between a warning and a fatal outcome in the future. Survival in that moment was not due to a conscious action, but to the process stopping before reaching the critical point. And after knowing all this, one last reflection remains, an idea that connects everything and completely changes the way we understand our own survival. Here is where it all fits together. When you look back and join each of these moments, an unsettling idea appears. In other parallel universes, in other possible timelines, you are no longer here. You died on that car trip. You didn't leave the house in time. The food didn't dislodge. The clot didn't dissolve. The allergic reaction progressed a bit faster. The only reason you are still alive in this specific reality is not because you are special, more careful, or stronger. It's because a series of random variables aligned in your favor at the last possible instant. A green light, an empty road, an object that moved just enough, a biological system that resisted for a few more seconds. We tend to think that survival is the result of control, that if we are intelligent, attentive, or responsible, we are safe. But these episodes prove the opposite. Daily life is full of invisible risks that don't announce their arrival. They don't feel heroic. They don't activate the alarm instinct. They simply happen in silence. Every day that passes without incident reinforces a dangerous illusion, the feeling of invulnerability. We believe that nothing is going to happen to us because it has never happened to us. But statistics don't work like that. Luck is not a permanent quality. It is a resource that runs out over time. So the next time you feel invincible, remember this. Death has already tried to reach you more times than you imagine. And so far, it has failed. Not because you are immortal, but because you have been lucky. Very lucky. And luck, sooner or later, always runs out.